Okay, so I want to start with a number, and I want you to just sit with it for a second. $9 million. That's roughly what Todd Blanche's law firm collected for 2 years of defending Donald Trump in criminal court. And then, somehow, the guy who spent 2 years fighting the Justice Department on Trump's behalf ends up running the Justice Department, second in command, Deputy Attorney General. And this past Wednesday, July 15th, all of that finally came home to roost in a hearing room because Senator Peter Welch from Vermont he didn't even need fancy legal theory. He used the most basic logic you can imagine to unravel the whole thing. Blanche sat there and said, hey, I followed every ethics rule there is. But here's the thing he left out. Just watch this for a second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Deputy Attorney General. I want to talk to you a little bit about the anti-weaponization fund. Just by way of background, you've had a long-standing relationship, of course, with President Trump, served as his personal criminal attorney, right?
I met him for the first time a couple years ago.
Right. And in the course of your representation of the president, you earned over $9 million, correct?
Well, my law firm was paid that much. I had 6 or 7 lawyers.
Well, that was in your financial disclosures. I don't have a problem.
Oh, no, I did. I was paid it. Sorry, but I'm saying it went to my law firm. I had employees.
Right. It's been raised that you have a close relationship with the president, but you're entitled to that, and the president is entitled to appoint as Attorney General a person in whom he has some trust. So that's not an issue for me. But on the anti-weaponization fund, there is the question of whether a president who is suing the taxpayers, the IRS, for $10 billion, and where his formerly personal lawyer is representing the taxpayers, is there a conflict of interest? And my understanding is that before you actually got here, you did get ethics training when you were, after you were acting Deputy Attorney General, correct?
Yes.
And my understanding is that you were advised that you should not be engaged in matters that affected President Trump in his individual capacity. Is that correct?
No, I'm not sure what your understanding is based upon, but no. There's very clear ethics rules that I was required to follow that I do follow.
It's based on a letter from Mr. Terrell, and you received normal ethics training.
Yes.
And normal ethics includes that you do not represent someone with whom you have been representing them before in a personal matter, right?
I'm not trying to get uber technical, but there are very technical rules around the ethics requirements, and I follow them.
All right. Well, maybe you could provide us with what the ethical materials
I can tell you
were
right
that
now
were
if you're
provided.
interested.
What I'd like you to do is send us the materials. Let me go on. If you had an issue, there was a dispute involving, say, Paramount, would you have a lawyer from the Justice Department who owned $9 million in stock negotiate on behalf of the government with that company?
It depends on as long as there's an ethical and no reason there was no conflict.
So if I had $9 million in stock with Paramount, I'm representing the people. There's an adversarial relationship. You'd let me negotiate on behalf of the people when the outcome of those negotiations would have an impact on my stock price?
Sorry, I just want to understand your hypo. If a lawyer for the Department of Justice has $9 million in Paramount stock, they should not be on that case.
Right.
I agree. Yes.
Okay. And, you know, what happened here with the president that's so mystifying to many of us, it would be analogous if the governor of Vermont sued the Department of Taxes for $10 billion. And we don't appoint attorney generals, but in New Hampshire they do, but let's say we did. And the governor is formerly personal attorney.
There's no comparison
Let me finish my question. The governor sues the Department of Taxes for $10 billion. His former personal attorney, who's now appointed attorney general, negotiates with the Department of Taxes and ends up settling by setting up a fund in the control, essentially, of the governor for $1.776 billion. That doesn't sound fishy to you?
Well, the hypo you just described, I don't think it's appropriate to use the word fishy. It's either ethical or not ethical,
Well,
and there's
you know
no.
what? Vermonters would just say it stinks. I mean, that is truly bizarre, that the chief executive gets his appointed person who was formerly his personal attorney to negotiate on his behalf, where at the end of the day, taxpayers are going to pay. So I'll just leave it at
But
that.
the other thing I'll correct, though, is you use the word as if I negotiated. I wasn't part of the negotiation, which I've said before.
Your
so-
department is. You had to sign
Yes,
off on it.
that's true.
That is your signature.
Yes, that is my
So
signature.
whether, I mean, look, you're at the top of the pile here. So
Yes.
you don't get involved in all the phone calls and all the details. But at the end of the day, you have to do due diligence and satisfy yourself that you in good faith can sign off on the agreement.
Correct.
And you did. So
Yes.
that is your responsibility, and I'm sure you accept
Oh, I
it.
do have responsibility for it.
That's
I agree
right.
with that. Yes.
All right. And, you know, let's talk about the pardons.
So, let's actually name the guy Welch was talking about there, because his whole story matters. It's Joseph Terrell. He ran the department's ethics office. And here's the timeline that really gets me. Less than 2 weeks after Blanche took the deputy AG job back in March of 2025, Terrell sat him down and briefed him personally on his ethics obligations. CNN reported the details of that meeting back in May, and the conclusion wasn't, a suggestion, it was a requirement. Recusal from anything touching the president in his personal capacity. Legally required, not a nice to have. And here's the part that really gets me. Before that briefing even happened, Blanche had already promised the opposite under oath at his confirmation hearing back in February. He told the Senate flat out that he'd follow the advice of career ethics experts inside the department if recusal ever came up. So that's sworn testimony, on the record, months before he did the exact opposite thing. Now, his defense on Wednesday, the one where he kept saying, "I didn't negotiate, I only signed," that's supposed to create some distance, right? Like he wasn't really involved. But signing is the whole ballgame here. The deal he put his name to, dated May 19th, actually had 2 parts bolted together. Part 1, the anti-weaponization fund, the thing he now calls dead. Part 2, an executive order, signed solo, permanently blocking the IRS from ever auditing the president's past tax returns, or his sons, or their businesses. And get this, a federal court later threw out the underlying settlement entirely, but that executive order? Still standing, still in effect. Speaking of that court ruling, it landed just 2 days before the hearing, Monday, July 13th. U.S. District Judge Kathleen Williams didn't leave much room for interpretation. She found that the President and the Justice Department were never actually adverse parties in the first place, which the Constitution requires for any of this to be a valid lawsuit. Her words basically were that the whole case existed to manufacture legal legitimacy for a settlement with no real legal or factual basis. She also told the court clerk to flag the matter to the New York bar where Blanche is licensed because disciplinary proceedings against him are already underway. All of that already public, already known, before he sat down in that chair. And it gets worse, honestly. Even declaring the fund dead doesn't actually kill it. Senator John Cornyn, Texas Republican, former judge himself, pushed on exactly this at the same hearing. The settlement is a signed, binding contract. Trump and his sons are the named plaintiffs, and they've never agreed in writing to void that anti-weaponization provision. Blanche admitted under oath that the settlement is enforceable, and the Trump's lawyers could theoretically claim the Justice Department breached it by not paying out. So the fund isn't gone, it's dormant, and the person who could revive it happens to control the entire executive branch, including the Justice Department that would have to defend against him. Now, 4 months after that ethics briefing, the man who delivered it, Terrell, got fired. Attorney General Pam Bondi let him go after nearly 20 years at the department. He's since sued the DOJ over it. And it didn't stop there. The administration also gutted the Office of Professional Responsibility itself and handed ethics oversight to political appointees. So the guy who said recusal was required? Gone. The office built to enforce that standard? Also gone. Here's a comparison that I think just makes this whole thing impossible to spin. Lisa Monaco, Deputy Attorney General under Biden. When the department opened investigations touching Hunter Biden's finances and Biden's own handling of classified documents, Monaco recused herself, basically completely. No fight, no arguing about technical distinctions, because she'd worked closely with the Biden family years earlier. She just stepped back. That's the standard Blanche's own predecessor applied to herself voluntarily. and it's the exact standard he refused to apply when it was his own former client on the other side. And this isn't even his first brush with this kind of thing. Months before the IRS settlement, 6 senators, including Elizabeth Warren and Dick Durbin, pointed to a ProPublica investigation showing Blanche held at least $159,000 in crypto-related assets, right around the time he ordered the Justice Department to shut down its crypto fraud and money laundering enforcement team. He'd promised in his confirmation ethics pledge to sell those holdings within 90 days. He killed that enforcement team before the 90 days were even up. The senators called it a glaring conflict of interest and said he should have recused himself from that call entirely. So let's be precise about what actually survives here, because that matters. 6 weeks before this hearing, Representative Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut asked Blanche directly at a House Appropriations hearing whether the provision shielding the president, his sons, and their businesses from all civil and criminal tax action on prior returns was still moving forward. He confirmed it. The fund, the politically toxic part, gets called dead, but the executive order, the part that actually cuts the IRS out of the president's tax history forever, survived the backlash, survived the court ruling, survived every hearing since. So just take a step back for a second and think about what that actually means if you're a taxpayer. A sitting president sues his own government. His own former personal lawyer, now running the Justice Department, signs off on a deal that makes the president and his family essentially untouchable by the IRS. The one guy who objected to any of it gets fired, and the only thing that deal actually locked into place, permanently, is protection for the president, not for you. So let's be precise about what actually survives here, because that matters. 6 weeks before this hearing, Representative Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut asked Blanche directly at a House Appropriations hearing whether the provision shielding the president, his sons, and their businesses from all civil and criminal tax action on prior returns was still moving forward. He confirmed it. The fund, the politically toxic part, gets called dead, but the executive order, the part that actually cuts the IRS out of the president's tax history forever, survived the backlash, survived the court ruling, survived every hearing since. So just take a step back for a second and think about what that actually means if you're a taxpayer. A sitting president sues his own government. His own former personal lawyer, now running the Justice Department, signs off on a deal that makes the president and his family essentially untouchable by the IRS. The one guy who objected to any of it gets fired, and the only thing that deal actually locked into place, permanently, is protection for the president, not for you. And I think that's really what that hearing exchange was. It wasn't really about the fund anymore by that point, since the fund's already dead. It was an official telling Congress, on the record, that he followed every rule, right after the paper trail showed the opposite. That's the moment you find out who an institution is actually built to serve. Because here's the bigger issue underneath all of it. This wasn't just one guy ignoring one ethics briefing. The administration fired the man who delivered it, then dismantled the entire office responsible for enforcing it. Experts who spoke with CNN made the point plainly. Without a working ethics infrastructure inside the department, its ability to prosecute anything touching its own integrity gets shaky, legally speaking. Because an institution's independence only means something if the people who enforce its rules are actually still there to enforce them. And Senator Welch, at the end of the day, just said it plainly. It stinks. And honestly, everything that's come out since that Wednesday hearing just keeps backing him up. They fired the ethics official who told Blanche recusal was required. They dismantled the office built to enforce that. A federal court called the whole arrangement self-dealing. His own predecessor recused herself the moment any conflict showed up. No drama, no argument. And yet Blanche is still sitting there, asking the Senate to confirm him permanently, while defending a deal a federal judge already called an abuse of the judicial process. Call it technical compliance if you really want to, but at this point the paper trail's already made the actual case. Anyway, that's where it stands right now. If you found this useful, drop a like. It actually helps a ton. Let me know what you think in the comments. I read all of them. And if you want more of this kind of breakdown, go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.